2014 while flying from Malaysia to China. A Boeing 777 carrying 239 passengers and crew members vanished into thin air. The global search effort, the largest in aviation history, only turned up a mere 20 pieces of aircraft debris. However, the Prime Minister of Malaysia has declined to comment, other than to say that the aircraft disappeared over the Indian Ocean. The lack of closure has propelled multiple theories, including a hijacking, a United States capture, a crew suicide, as it was reported later that the pilot was having marital problems, a fire aboard the aircraft, vertical entry into the ocean, a meteor strike, and even an alien abduction. Despite the passage of time and the $160 million spent scouring thousands of square miles of ocean, the disappearance of Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 and the fate of the 239 people aboard remains a mystery. Number 32. The peculiar death of Charles C. Morgan. On March 22nd, 1977, escrow agent Charles Morgan went missing after leaving his home in Phoenix, Arizona. 3 days later, he finally returned home around 2 a.m. His wife, Ruth, reported that he had a plastic handcuff around one ankle and handcuffs around his hands. He pointed to his throat, indicating that he couldn't speak, so his wife handed him a pen and paper, and he wrote that there was a hallucinogenic drug in his throat that could destroy his nervous system. Ruth wanted to get in contact with the police or a physician, but Charles told her not to and said it would put their family in danger. As Ruth nursed him back to health, he disclosed that he had been working as a secret agent for the past 2 to 3 years for the U.S. Treasury Department. then claimed his abductors took his Treasury ID and provided no more details. 2 months after his initial disappearance, he was reported to be missing again. After 9 days, Ruth received a phone call from an unidentified woman that said Chuck is all right. Ecclesiastes 12:1-8, and then hung up. 2 days after the strange phone call, on June 18th, his body was discovered lying 40 miles west of Tucson near his car. Charles had been shot in the back of the head by his own gun. He was found wearing a bulletproof vest, a belt buckle that had a hidden knife, and a holster. A pair of sunglasses was found at the scene that was not his. Investigators searched his car and found several weapons and a cache of ammunition. The car had also been altered so that it could be unlocked from the fender. On the rear seat of the car, Morgan's tooth was discovered, wrapped in a white handkerchief. Bizarrely, there was also a $2 bill with several Spanish surnames and a map of the border area pinned to Morgan's underwear. The map led to Robles Junction and Felicity, the area between Tucson and Mexico. Those towns had a reputation for smuggling at the time. Above the surnames, Ecclesiastes 12 was written, and an arrow was drawn to the bill's serial number, pointing to the numbers 1 and 8. Some of the other writings on the bill had alleged Masonic references, and Charles also had a piece of paper with directions in his handwriting that led to the site where he was found. Medical examiners claimed that Charles Morgan was only dead for 12 hours when he was found. Strangely, there were no fingerprints found on the scene, not even on the gun. On Morgan's hands, they found gunpowder and residue. For this reason, the sheriff's department labeled the death a suicide that seemed to be the end of the Charles C. Morgan case. His mother, Christine Collins, a telephone operator, reported her son missing 5 days later on March 15th. At the time, the area was still recovering from the kidnapping and gruesome murder of a 12-year-old girl, Marion Parker, that had only happened 3 months earlier. Tips of apparent Walter sightings were coming from as far away as San Francisco and even Oakland. In one bizarre tip, someone reported seeing Walter at a gas station in Glendale, his body wrapped in newspaper with only his head visible. Police searched for months without any success. In Illinois, in August 1928, state police picked up a runaway boy who matched Walter's description. The boy told authorities he was Walter Collins and gave a hazy description about his abduction. He spoke to Christine over the phone, and she paid $70 to have her son back to Los Angeles. The boy lived with Christine for 3 weeks when she realized that this boy wasn't her son. Christine found that the boy who was living with her was 1 inch shorter, and she used dental records to show that this was a different kid. Christine told police that yes, he looks like Walter, and in some ways acts like my son, but still, I'm not certain about it. You see, Walter was quiet and well behaved. He always called me mother. This child calls me Ma, and at times he is hard to handle. I certainly hope that he is my son, but somehow I just can't bring myself to believe it. Pressured by the public, the police insisted that the child was indeed Walter. They conducted a series of tests to prove it. They had the child find his way back home from memory and brought in Walter's pet dog, who allegedly recognized the boy as its owner. Nevertheless, Christine wasn't convinced. LAPD Captain J.J. Jones accosted the grieving mother, saying, "What are you trying to do? Make fools out of us all? Or are you trying to shirk your duties as a mother and have the state provide for your son? You are the most cruel-hearted woman I have ever known. You are a fool." On September 8th, 1928, the police had Christine committed to the psychiatric ward at the Los Angeles County General Hospital. While Christine was in the hospital, JJ spoke again to the boy that they had picked up in Illinois. During that conversation, the boy made it known that he was indeed not Walter Collins, but instead Arthur Hutchins. After his mother had died, the boy ran away from his father and stepmother. He was hitchhiking around the U.S., and when inside a cafe, he was told that he resembled a missing boy from Los Angeles. When he was picked up, juvenile authorities were skeptical about his story, but the police were so desperate to close the Collins case that they insisted on its accuracy. As for why Arthur lied, he said that he wanted to go to Hollywood to meet a cowboy actor, Tom Mix. Christine was released from the psych ward on September 13th, 1928, and sued the LAPD. J.J. Jones was suspended from duty. Collins won her lawsuit against Jones and was rewarded $10,800, which he never paid. She spent the rest of her life continuing to search for her missing son. Number 34. The Unexplained Phoenix Lights. On March 13th, 1997, a string of 5 lights in a V formation appeared in the sky above Phoenix, Arizona. The National UFO Reporting Center reported that the first call about the lights came in around 8:16 p.m. from a retired police officer in Paulden, Arizona, which is about 2 hours north of Phoenix. After that, the National UFO Reporting Center began to receive a slew of calls south of Paulden, suggesting that the lights were moving in a southeastern direction. Allegedly, there were over 700 witnesses who had seen the lights, including pilots, police officers, and military officials who lit up the National UFO Reporting Center switchboard, demanding explanations. Some described the lights as orbs. Others said triangles. However, a large number of witnesses described the lights as part of a singular massive craft that made no noise. Around 10 p.m., a second set of as many as 9 lights appeared in the sky. A laser printer technician, Dana Valentine, claimed to have witnessed the craft from his yard in Phoenix. We could see the outline of the mass behind the lights, but you couldn't actually see the mass, he reported. It was more like a gray distortion of the night sky, wavy. I don't know exactly what it was, but I know it's not a technology 12-year-old Leslie Metcalf was returning home from the beach with her family in Provincetown, Massachusetts. A local dog had followed them, and when it took off barking, Leslie broke away from her parents and started to go after it. In the dunes of Race Point Beach, a mile east of a ranger station, Leslie found the decomposing body of a naked woman. The woman was 5'6", weighed about 145 pounds, and was between 20 and 40 years old. She was lying on one side of a beach towel, with her head resting on a pair of jeans and a blue bandana. It was estimated that the body had been lying there from 10 days to 3 weeks before being discovered. The left side of her head was crushed, and she had almost been completely decapitated. While no weapons were found, it was believed that a military entrenching tool was used to almost cut off the head. Her hands, though, were removed to conceal the identity through fingerprints. Due to the horrific state of the body, authorities believed that the woman was murdered. With no sign of struggle at the time, authorities believed that the unidentified victim would have known her murderer. The only signs of evidence were the size 10 footprints that indicated a heavy person running away. Provincetown Police Chief Jimmy Meads said that the killer likely drove the victim to the dune in a 4-wheel drive sand vehicle to sunbathe. Despite using bloodhounds, missing person bulletins, scourging the registers of local lodgings, and looking into anyone who had a permit to bring their vehicle onto the beach, police turned up nothing. In 2019, Provincetown local Margie Childs reflected on the case, saying the fact that no one could identify the Lady of the Dunes in the tight-knit community was very strange. Almost 50 years later, the victim known as the Lady of the Dunes is still unidentified. Number 36. The Case of Mary Reeser. On July 2nd, 1951, in St. Petersburg, Florida, Mary Hardy Reeser was visited by her son, Dr. Richard Reeser, in her apartment. Mary had told her son that she had taken 2 mild sedatives that were mainly used to calm patients before surgery. She had also told him she was planning to take 2 more before bed. Later that night, she would fall asleep in an upholstered chair for the last time, as she would become the victim of an apparent house fire. The next morning, Mary's landlord would report smelling smoke around 5 a.m. But it wasn't until 8 a.m. when she went to go deliver a telegraph to Mary that she would smell the smoke again. She discovered soot in the hallway and the doorknob leading to Mary's apartment that was too hot to grab. She discovered soot in the hallway and the doorknob leading to Mary's apartment was too hot to grab, so she enlisted the help of nearby house painters to get into the apartment. What they found inside the apartment was truly horrifying. They found the remains of Mary Reeser. Her skull apparently was shrunk to the size of a cup, and parts of her spine also remained. But the most terrifying was Mary's left foot was found still in its black satin slipper, the skin unburned. The rest of her remains had been completely cremated. What makes this case odd was the environment of her surroundings. In order for a body to be cremated, the body must burn at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit for 3 to 4 hours. Yet, somehow, the surrounding area of her chair and the rest of her apartment were relatively unaffected. The walls had no burn marks and showed no signs of scorching or burned paint. Light switches were melted, but outlets were still completely functional. Candlesticks had melted, but their wicks stood upright, and a stack of newspapers close to the chair were undamaged. Mary's neighbors were also unaware of the fire. The FBI eventually declared that Mary had been incinerated by the wick effect when the clothing of the victim soaks up melted human fat and acts like the wick of a candle. As she was a known user of sleeping pills, they hypothesized that she had fallen unconscious while smoking and set fire to her night clothes. However, there is still some speculation that she died of spontaneous human combustion. Number 37. Escape from Alcatraz. Formerly a military base, the high-security prison Alcatraz sat on a 22-acre island known as the Rock, about 1.25 miles away from San Francisco. cell block B that might not have been sealed over with concrete like the majority of the vents. If this was true, it could provide them with a way to get on the roof of the prison from the inside. West also began working with the maintenance crew that provided him insight into the building structure, layout, and weaknesses. By September 1st, 1961, the Englund brothers, John and Clarence, Morris and West, requested cell moves that made them closer to each other in cell block B, directly under the unsecured vent. All cell moves were approved. The plan to escape was undoubtedly bold and ingenious. Phase 1 involved creating a head start to provide them enough time to tackle the mile and a quarter to San Francisco. They created a diversion by painting dummy heads, which were made from a plaster-like mix of soap, concrete, and other materials completed with real human hair. They laid the heads in their beds to fool the guards, and sure enough, on June 12th, on the morning following the escape, when the 7 a.m. bell went off to wake the prisoners, guards discovered that the prisoners were still asleep in their beds. It wasn't until one of the guards reached into Morris's cell, pushed the head, and it fell onto the ground that the guards realized that something was wrong. To this day, the dummy head still bores the damage that resulted in this fall. It's unknown who exactly came up with the idea to make dummy heads. However, Clarence worked as a barber and had access to hair trimmings. Either way, phase 1 of the plan was a success. After laying the dummy heads in their beds, the gang moved on to phase 2 of their plans to escape the inescapable prison. The men went to work on busting out of their cells. All 4 of them had 5-inch by 9.5-inch ventilation grates in the back of their cells. Perhaps it came from his time in maintenance. West knew that the wall surrounding the grates was less than 6 inches thick, making it possible for each man to expand the hole in their cell to fit through. For months, the prisoners spent time drilling small, close-knit holes around the cover of the ventilation grates using crude handmade tools like spoons stolen from the kitchen and a drill made from a vacuum cleaner motor. These holes made it possible to remove the entire small section of the wall around the air vents, which they covered with their musical instruments or fake covers made of cardboard. These holes allowed them to access a utility corridor that was directly behind their cells that was typically left unguarded. From there, they were able to climb up to a hidden land area directly above their cell block. area, they were able to make the dummy head, tools, and other items they'd use in their great escape. However, it's worth noting that West never made it to this landing spot during the escape because he was unable to break through the last portion of his wall around his ventilation grate. Consequently, he was left behind. From the landing, the trio was able to climb pipes to the ceiling and reach an air vent that they had previously pried off to ready their escape. Experts say that a sound that was heard around 10:30 p.m. was the sound of the air vent cover being pushed off on the roof. They then climbed down the roof via a pipe to the back of their cell block, climbed the 15-foot fence, and made their way to the north shore of the island. To escape the island, the prisoners had made life preservers and a 14-foot rubber raft, all made from prison-issued raincoats. They gathered over 50 raincoats for the job, possibly stitched them together using sewing machines, and vulcanized the rubber coats by holding the seams up to the heat from the steam pipes. The raft was inflated by using a concertina. Once it was realized that the prisoners were missing, Alcatraz went into lockdown as a search began. Guards quickly found the hidden workshop, the hole in the ceiling, and footprints on the roof and on the ground of the pipe where they climbed down. The FBI joined the case, as well as the Coast Guard and the Bureau of Prison Authorities, in a wide-scale search, but the escapees, as well as their raft, were never seen again. Number 38. The Sheppard Murder Case. On February 21st, 1945, Dr. Samuel Sheppard and Marilyn Reese were married and settled near Lake Eerie, Ohio. 2 years later, they had their first and only child, which they affectionately nicknamed Chip. Samuel was a respected neurosurgeon, and the couple was believed to have a happy marriage. Their small suburban community was the kind where everyone was close-knit and were friends. On July 3rd, 1954, the Sheppards hosted a party for all of their neighbors, which included dinner, drinks, and a movie. Just after midnight, Samuel fell asleep on the couch, and Marilyn said her goodbyes authorities arrived around 6 a.m. According to the police report, Marilyn's body was found lying upwards and her face was turned towards the door. She was beaten beyond recognition. She had over 20 gashes carved deep into her face and scalp. The sheets were covered with blood, and the walls were dripping with heavy spatter. Her pajamas were partially removed, leaving her exposed. The autopsy reported that her time of death was around 4:30 a.m. Sadly, it also revealed that Marilyn had been 4 months pregnant with their second child. According to Samuel, he had been asleep downstairs when he heard Marilyn shout his name. He ran upstairs and found her being attacked by a white form. They fought, but then Samuel had been hit on the back of his neck and was knocked out. When he woke, Marilyn was dead and the white form was gone. He then ran to Chip's room and thankfully saw him alive and sleeping soundly. He then went downstairs and then saw the white form exiting through the back door. He chased the tall and bushy-haired figure down the shores of Lake Eerie. Samuel then explained that he lunged or jumped and grasped at the strange figure, but then he said, "I felt myself twisting or choking, and that terminated my consciousness. When Samuel came to, it was nearly dawn, and his shirt and watch were missing." However, even though he was the only witness to the crime, Samuel became the most likely suspect. On December 21st, 1954, after extensive deliberating for 4 days, the jury found Sheppard guilty of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison, but staunchly maintained his innocence. Eventually, his life sentence was overturned, and the real story about what happened to Marilyn Sheppard remains a mystery. Number 39. The Killing of Ken Rex McElroy. In Skidmore, Missouri, on July 10th, 1981, Ken Rex McElroy would be shot dead in the streets in broad daylight in this sleepy small town. There were amongst 60 witnesses that saw the event, but to this day, the crime remains unsolved. Ken Rex McElroy grew up in a poor family and left was reported as being a 270-pound giant of a man, and a local farmer described him. I think that Ken simply wanted to be big and important and have people afraid of him when he walked down the street. And he got that. They were. McElroy made a decent living by leasing the land off of his farm, trading and racing dogs, as well as allegedly stealing livestock, grain, alcohol, gasoline, and antiques. He was in constant trouble with the law. His lawyer estimated that he was charged with various crimes at least 3 times a year. By some counts, he was indicted as many as 21 times, but escaped conviction all but once. McElroy used to brag that his lawyer, Richard Gene McFadden, also represented the mob and would keep him out of jail. Another tactic McElroy would use to avoid jail time was to intimidate witnesses by following them or park outside their homes and watch them until they were no longer willing to testify. Some of his bigger crimes were robbery, harassing, assaulting women, destroying property, threatening lives, and shooting at least 2 people, all of which he avoided jail for. Police were also afraid of confronting McElroy since he was almost always heavily armed and didn't think twice before shooting a cop. The people of Skidmore felt abandoned by the justice system that couldn't stop McElroy from causing havoc in their town. On April 25th, 1980, in Ernest Bowenkamp's general store, the store clerk, Evelyn Sumi, would ask McElroy's 8-year-old daughter, Tanya, to return a piece of candy that she didn't pay for. When McElroy learned of the situation, he became so enraged that he began stalking the Bowenkamp family. On July 8th, 1980, McElroy drove to the alley behind the general store. Once there, he threatened Bo Bowenkamp and shot the 70-year-old grocer in the neck at close range with a shotgun. This was the second time he had shot someone. The first time was local farmer Romaine Henry, whom McElroy shot in the stomach after Henry was chasing him off of Henry's land. Miraculously, Bo Bowenkamp survived the shot, and McElroy was arrested and charged with attempted murder. His preliminary trial was set for August 18th, 1980, and in his usual fashion, McElroy tried to intimidate the Bowenkamp family and supporters from testifying. Bowenkamp's wife said the following: "You can't know how intimidating it was after that. Before his trial, he'd drive up to our house in his pickup at night and just sit there. Sometimes he would fire his gun. It was frightening. was able to convict McElroy of a crime. Granted, he was only convicted of second-degree assault. The jury set a maximum sentence of 2 years, and the judge freed him on a $40,000 bail bond pending the appeal. This is because Baird lessened the charge from attempt to kill to knowingly caused serious physical injury. Soon after he was released, he was bizarrely spotted with a rifle and bayonet at the town's local bar, D&G Tavern, where he was making graphic threats about killing Bo Bowenkamp. He was then arrested and then quickly released for violating bail by being armed. On July 10th, 1981, there was a local meeting at the town's Legion Hall, just down the street from the D&G Tavern. As many as 60 residents attended, including the mayor and the sheriff. During the meeting, the whole topic of discussion was what they could do legally to prevent McElroy from harming anyone else. County Sheriff Dan Estes suggested a neighborhood watch, but the mindset was said perfectly by an attendee. We simply felt that the system had failed us. We all knew what McElroy was like, and there he was, again and again. It seemed like no one could stop him. During the meeting, a local said that they had spotted McElroy and his young wife, Trina, on their way to grab drinks at the D&G Tavern. The meeting was quickly adjourned, and the 60-odd people who were at that meeting quietly descended on the tavern, flanking McElroy's truck. Some of the attendees went into the bar and waited for McElroy to finish his drinks. Upon returning to the truck, where Trina was sitting in the passenger seat, McElroy lit a cigarette. Trina then reported glancing over her shoulder and saw someone point a rifle towards the back of the truck, take aim at McElroy, and then shots were fired. McElroy was shot at several times and hit twice, killing him. In all, there were 46 potential witnesses to the shooting, including Trina. No one called for an ambulance. Only Trina claimed to identify a gunman. However, every other witness either was unable to name the person who had pulled the trigger or claimed not to have seen who fired the fatal shots. The DA declined to press charges. To this day, the person who shot Ken McElroy remains unknown. Number 40. The Michelle Von Emster case. On April 15th, 1994, in San Diego, California, around Sunset Cliffs, 2 surfers found the body of 25-year-old Michelle Von Emster floating face down in a kelp bed. The body was taken to the lifeguard headquarters. She was found naked, wearing only a brass bracelet and 2 rings. She had a butterfly tattoo on large, tearing-type wounds with missing tissue, as the body was missing most of its right leg. He believed that Michelle had not been in the water long and marked her death as unknown. Nevertheless, there was an overwhelming consensus that her death was caused by a shark attack. 1 day later, on April 16th, a formal autopsy was conducted by a medical examiner, Brian Blackburn. In addition to her right leg being missing from the thigh down, Michelle's neck was broken, as if she had been in a car wreck and had broken ribs, scrapes, bruises, and contusions on her face. Sand was also found in her mouth, throat, lungs, and stomach. Furthermore, the autopsy revealed that she had been alive when the injuries were inflicted. According to Blackburn's timeline, he concluded that she got into the water around midnight, and this was indeed a shark attack because lifeguards, harbor police, and marine biologists at Scripps Institution of Oceanography told him so. However, there are things that don't add up for the cause of death being a shark attack. Blackburn had never seen a death caused by a shark before, and neither had anyone who initially saw the body. The experts at the Scripps Institution had never seen Michelle's body, making their initial inquiries questionable. Additionally, many experts say today that this death wasn't caused by a great white, as the autopsy stated, including Ralph Collier, the leading expert in Pacific Coast white shark behavior and ecology. After seeing Michelle's body, Collier said, "When a shark bites off a part of a limb, the break is clean, almost like you put it on a table saw. What remained of Michelle's femur was anything but. It looked like what happens when you get a piece of bamboo and whittle it down to a point with a knife. I've looked at close to 100 photos of cases that I have reviewed over the years, and I've never seen any bones that came to a point. Plus, it's important to note, once Michelle's leg had been severed, she would have bled out quickly from a severed femoral artery. This would have made it extremely difficult to take a large breath, as she would have had to have done to get the sand into her stomach. This makes the theory that a shark forced her to the bottom of the ocean, where she took a breath and swallowed sand, extremely unlikely. Officially, Michelle's death is considered the result of a great white shark attack, but the true nature and circumstances of her untimely demise remain a mystery. So that is